94, 80, I think, fight gone bad. And his training has basically focused around Olympic lifts and gymnastics in the gym. And then out of the gym, he grapples and boxes and does everything that an MMA fighter does. And in his off season, we will do more of a standard kind of CrossFit approach, but interestingly, Glenn's highest workout puts are when he's in fight camp. And that's when he's doing 6 hours a day of fight training. And then in those periods, he's in a strength maintenance phase. So we block his training to complement what his needs and goals are. And it's frankly terrifying to see what he does to these other 150, he fights at 155 pounds. So these dudes that he goes up against, it ends up looking like a man versus a boy in the fight. And the only other people that I see doing something on par with this is kind of like George St. Pierre. He has a very, very solid S&C coach, nutrition very solid, but it's rare that folks are handling that issue at that level and understanding the appropriate places to drop in metabolic conditioning and how to put that into a year-round training camp.
Sure.
So another real common person that we're going to deal with is like a mother of two, maybe 25, 30 pounds overweight, something like that, very, very busy, very hectic life. And this is one of those things for which the unweighed, unmeasured, kind of paleo approach to things is pretty easy, because when you have somebody who has a family and they work and they've got a relationship to maintain and all the rest of that stuff, and they want to come to your CrossFit facility or whatever facility you're training at and get some training, the weighing and measuring of every one of their meals can be daunting at best. And then it brings up the question of how do you feed mama bear and baby bear and papa bear and all that stuff, whereas if you just generally cook and you have meat, veggies, fruit, nuts and seeds around, and folks eat the satiety on that, typically they do very, very well. And you mentioned, Andy, really the one thing that has hamstrung this very shooting from the hip approach, which is that sometimes people will overdo the nut consumption. So they're just taking in way too many calories for them to be able to lean out. At some point, even insulin control is going to lose out to just basic caloric intake. And the people, interestingly, can still be kind of overeating calorically, but not really gaining any weight because they're kind of modulating their insulin levels and upregulating the metabolic rate. But if we can then curtail their nut intake, then the people usually lean out quite quickly. And we've had, examples, Katie Scuber and some of our other folks, size 14 down to a size 2 in 3 months, doing an unweighed, unmeasured paleo diet amidst owning a business, being married, having 2 or 3 kids. Sarah Fergoso is another great example of that. 3 kids, busy chiropractic practice. She's one of our busiest top producing trainers. And a weight measured approach was not going to work for her lifestyle. It wasn't going to work for her family. But the whole thing has been shifted over to basic paleo foods. And she went from a size 14 down to a size 2. Is knocking on the door of a double body weight deadlift, has about 20, 22 pull-ups, pretty solid little performer, and then, is a mom. So it's damn impressive stuff.
And I think what's also interesting about Sarah is, we kind of get a lot of questions about, well, my family's not going to eat like this, my kids aren't going to eat like this. And I think, Sarah's an example where if the head of the household cooks this type of food, only shop for this type of food, you may have a little, uprising for a few days, but eventually kids are going to get hungry, they're going to eat, and as long as you're having good, healthy foods around the house, that's what they're going to eat. Sure, when they're at friends' houses or at school, they're probably going to consume, some non-approved foods, but, kids are kids, and you can only go to control their behavior so much, but generally we see them over time, they decide to get accustomed to eating like this, and after a while, they don't think they're missing anything from it.
Yeah, totally, and that's the way Sarah's handled it. All of her kids are stoked on it. She did have the peasant uprising for a couple of days, but now the kids are all pretty fired up, and she actually is doing a blog, Everyday Paleo, which she's shifting that from a Tumblr account to a WordPress account, so we should have like a solid URL on that within a couple of days. But she's just kind of relating what they do every day, how they do breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the kids are all involved with it. And if she doesn't take a photo of one of the meals, and the kids are all over about it and usually take a photo. So she's made this whole transformation with the family, and it was some work up front, but it's way easier on the back end. And she's done it in a way where the kids aren't neurotic. You know, the kids enjoy what's going on, and when they go to a friend's house, like you said, you know, they just eat what they eat. And so it's not so much that there's like good food or bad food, they just have what food is available at home, and that's what they roll with. So I think the last person that we'll kind of consider on this post-workout vein would be the underperformer. Usually when people start a CrossFit program, or some sort of solid strength and conditioning, but I think CrossFit, because it's so performance oriented, usually if people are fed and watered properly, and if they have some modicum of reasonable programming, they've got like a 3.5 year of just personal record after personal record. Like every session in the gym seemingly should be an improvement on something. And it's maybe not everything, but you know, just some element should be up. And when we see folks, and again, not to pick on the ladies, but it's usually female, they may have like one pull-up, or they're right near one pull-up, but they'll have it and then they'll lose it. The body composition isn't shifting as fast as it should. If we see somebody with kind of failure to thrive, or if we graph their progress and it looks like a balloon bobbing along the roof of the ceiling of a room, then we know that the person is underfed. Typically inadequate protein, inadequate fat, inadequate calories overall. And if we can get this person to just up their food intake overall, and this would probably be a person that I wouldn't, depending on where the body composition was at, if they're already lean, I might drop in a few more carbs in that post-workout meal just to try to stimulate the appetite a little bit. A lot of these folks are kind of meal skippers, and so we may even give them a little more yam, a little more sweet potato or fruit or something to try and get them hungry later so that they eat more. If the body composition is an issue, then I'll keep them lower carb and try to lean them out while we're doing this. But generally, if people are fed and watered properly, they should see some really good improvement in body composition. And again, the choice of what route one does with the post-workout meal is going to be dependent on where the person is at and what their goals are.
Sure, and I think the other point to make on that is there's always some room for tinkering on all of this. So, some of the things that we commonly see as being successful, sometimes we obviously find folks that are totally the other side of the spectrum. So that's why I know you're always encouraging everyone, tinker a little bit. And I think, as coaches and trainers, as even as fitness enthusiasts, there's got to be some room for that in your training. Obviously, you can't tinker forever, but, blocks of sort of trying different approaches, kind of minor tweaks to see how it impacts your training, your general well-being, your level of leanness, whatever your goals are certainly things that I think in the long run are worthwhile to do. Otherwise, you kind of get caught up in, this is the only approach that works, this is the only approach that works for me, and it may work really well, but sometimes taking breaks to try other things I think is very beneficial long term.
Yeah, absolutely. And as soon as you think you've got it all figured out, then you've ceased your evolution. And if you're a coach and you think you've got it all figured out, you're going to get passed up in the mix, because other folks are going to be tinkering and evolving their programming, whether it's food related or training related or any other type of advancement with this. It comes down to some real basic stuff at the end of the day. It's typically like, lift heavy, work hard, all that sort of jive. But there's always new ways to skin the cat, and there's just, every time I get to hang out with someone like Mike Bergner or Rip or Rutman or someone like that, these folks that have been doing this stuff for like 30 years and how they paid their bills doing this stuff for 30 years, it's stunning how many different ways they've tried, and they've always got their 90% rules. Like 90% of my folks fall within this kind of approach, but then they've got that 10% wiggle room for everybody that the standard approaches aren't working. And so definitely encourage folks to keep open-minded, keep learning, keep educating yourself, take some basic science classes for crying out loud, take some anatomy, physiology. You should understand how all that shit wires together. It's critical if you're going to take yourself seriously as a strength and conditioning professional that you get continuing ed in all of these areas.
Absolutely. Hey, Rob, we're coming up on about 40 minutes, so I think, for our first podcast, listeners, if anyone is actually going to listen to this and listen to interject and you ramble a bit, I think topic suggestions would be something that would be helpful for us long term. I think a lot of our ideas for the podcast come on random questions and things we talk about at the gym, based on your nutritional style speaking and just different conversations. But I think, some of these we're going to be able to glean from your blog. Obviously, post-workout nutrition gets a lot of hits. But I think we're certainly open to suggestions and ideas for folks, things that folks want to talk about.
Yeah, totally. And in the future, like you said, we'll actually probably have a little more focus because we'll be answering specific questions and whatnot. Just this post-workout question has been pretty nebulous for folks, and we, obviously stepped all around that and looked at some stuff besides just post-workout nutrition, but it shows a little bit of the complexity of how folks need to have a pretty broad view of it. But yeah, if folks have ideas for what they want to hear, ship it into robwolf.com, just a contact page there, and if it's good and smart, then we'll probably answer it. This is how we want to get as much information out to folks as we can.
Cool. All right, well, with that, we're going to shut down our first podcast, and we'll see all of you listening how bad this sucks.
I'm sure it's horrible, but we'll keep giving it a shot if folks are interested in hearing it. Thanks, Andy.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.